My father tried gaslighting me into a mental hospital to keep abusing my twin siblings, so I got a restraining order and ruined his life. 2 years later, he's begging to see my siblings. I'm pretending he's dead. I was 12 years old when I became a mother of 2, because that's when my twin siblings were born. You see, my dad was an alcoholic with the emotional maturity of a child, while my mom spent most of her time either working or trying not to tick off my dad. Either way, there was one thing they both avoided like the plague, and that was parenting. So when the twins, Ella and Elliot, were born, I was left to take care of them. I never really minded though, because to me, it was an opportunity to give someone the childhood I never had. I was failing school, barely sleeping, eating 1 meal a day, all because I was constantly waiting on them. The only parental role my dad played was punishment, but most of the time, it wasn't for any reason in particular. Sometimes he'd just come home from work angry and take his anger out on Elliot, or if he was drunk and saw his favorite football team lose a game, I would be the one to take a beating. But I never thought it was that bad, because he never left any marks. And the morning after losing his cool, he'd always take us out for ice cream and let us buy whatever we wanted. Looking back, it's obvious that I let him manipulate me into thinking his behavior was normal, but it was just easier that way. So by the time the twins were 6 and I was 18, my life had become a real-life episode of Shameless. I had no plans to attend college or do anything other than work and take care of the kids, until one day when everything changed. My dad was drunk driving home from the bar at 60 miles over the speed limit. He was on the road we lived on when he crashed. It wasn't like he was severely injured or anything. Actually, he seemed to be completely fine. There was just one part of him that was extremely bruised beyond repair, and that was his ego. So when he came home, he slammed the door open and greeted us in the way he always did, with love and kindness. "Lol JK," he yelled at the top of his lungs. "Why didn't anyone order me an Uber home?" His tone had an anger I didn't recognize, like all his pent-up rage was coming out at once. My heart dropped and I knew the twins were in the living room, so I ran downstairs to carry them up to the bedroom, because in our house, the lesser you made yourself seen, the safer you were. But I was too late. He had already kicked Ellie to the ground. As soon as I saw them, I shoved them towards the stairs and breathed a sigh of relief as I heard their little legs scurrying away. I already knew what was coming, and I immediately activated what I now like to joke about as being armadillo mode, which is basically just curling up into a ball and prioritizing the protection of my face and skull while I let the rest of my body suffer from the beating. I didn't even cry, just tried my best to disassociate and entertain myself with dark humor. After the first 2 minutes, I heard his breath become more shallow as his impact got harder. At least he's losing weight from how hard he's going right now. At the time, it was such a funny thought that I even felt the corners of my lips turn upwards into a smile. My imagination kept going. I thought about my dad being a Zumba dance teacher and teaching all his students his signature move called the Beat Your Child, where you kick your feet and activate your gluteal muscles. By the time he was finally done, I faced myself in the bathroom mirror and stared at my swollen self, the red pouring down my arm, my chipped tooth, and sometimes in life things are just so effed up that you have to laugh, and that was one of those times. I didn't want to annoy my parents, so I held my nose and laughed silently into my elbow. But once the adrenaline wore off and I felt the pain kick in, I cried myself to sleep on the bathroom floor. When I woke up, my heart rate was going at 100 miles per hour. The room was spinning and I could barely stand, and I guess my dad heard me stumbling around because he burst through the door with a huge smile on his face. "It's time to go out for ice cream," he exclaimed. I just stared at him. "Dad, can you please take me to the hospital? You effing ugly beach." His smile completely fell. "I'm trying to move on from what happened. Why can't you just make this family happy for once?" I just sighed and called an Uber. By the time I was seen by the nurses, I was too tired to lie anymore. "This was all because of my dad," I blurted out. The nurses looked really concerned, and I gave them all the necessary details. My address, my parents' full names, their phone numbers, everything. I didn't even care about myself anymore. I just wanted the twins to be safe. The hospital stitched me up and I went home that same evening. The twins had both been removed and relocated in an emergency evacuation, but because I was a friendless and broke legal adult, I had nowhere else to go, and I knew my dad would be angry, so I ran upstairs and grabbed Ella's hockey stick. I didn't even wait for him to hit me first before attacking. I'm not proud of what I did, but I was desperate. When I heard him coming up the stairs, I just swung. The hockey stick connected with his shoulder. He stumbled back, completely shocked. His face went from surprise to rage in about half a second. I'd never seen him look so murderous before. "You ungrateful little..." He started coming toward me. I swung again, this time catching him in the stomach. He doubled over, gasping for air. I ran past him down the stairs, stick still in hand. My mom was in the kitchen, staring at me with wide eyes. "What did you do?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I just grabbed my phone and wallet from the counter. My dad recovered faster than I expected. He thundered down the stairs after me, face red with fury. "You think you can hit me? In my house?" He lunged for me, but I dodged him. My mom just stood there, frozen. She never intervened, not once in all these years. I made it to the front door and yanked it open. My dad was right behind me. I swung the hockey stick one more time, catching him in the knee. He went down with a howl of pain. I dropped the stick and ran. I had nowhere to go. No friends close enough to trust with this. No relatives nearby. I ended up at a 24-hour diner, nursing a cup of coffee I could barely afford. My phone kept buzzing with texts from my dad. They started with threats, then shifted to apologies, then back to threats. Classic cycle. I spent that night on a bench in the park. It was cold and I was terrified, but it felt safer than going home. In the morning, I went to the police station. I filed filed a report about what happened to me and the twins. The officer looked sympathetic, but not surprised. They see this stuff all the time, I guess. When I mentioned the twins had been taken by CPS, the officer made some calls. Turns out they were placed with an emergency foster family just a few miles away. The police arranged for me to visit them that afternoon. Seeing Ella and Elliot was like having a weight lifted off my chest. They were in a clean house with a kind-looking couple named the Hendersons. Mrs. Henderson had made cookies. The twins looked okay. Not great, but okay. Elliot had a bruise on his arm from where Dad had grabbed him. Ella was quieter than usual. "Are you coming to live with us?" Elliot asked, his little face so hopeful it broke my heart. I had to tell him no. I was too old for the system. The Hendersons seemed genuinely nice, though. They promised to take good care of the twins while everything got sorted out. When I left, Mrs. Henderson pulled me aside. "You can visit anytime," she said, "and if you need a place to stay." She slipped me her phone number. I thanked her, but didn't take her up on it. I didn't want to bring my dad's rage anywhere near the twins' new safe place. I crashed at a cheap motel that night, using almost all the money I had saved from my part-time job at the grocery store. I kept thinking about what would happen next. Dad would be furious about the police report. Mom would probably side with him like always. The twins were safer now, but what about long-term? The next morning, I got a call from a social worker named Patricia. She wanted to meet to discuss options. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop. Patricia was middle-aged with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She laid out what was happening with the twins case and asked about my situation. "I can't go back there," I told her, "but I'm 18. I don't have anywhere else." She nodded like she'd heard this 1,000 times before. "There are resources for young adults in your situation," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "Emergency housing, job placement, counseling." I flipped through the papers, feeling overwhelmed. My whole life had been about surviving day to day and taking care of the twins. I'd never thought about what I might want for myself. I left the coffee shop with Patricia's folder tucked under my arm. My phone buzzed again, another text from my dad. This one was different from the others. "Come home. We need to talk. I'm sorry." I almost laughed out loud. 6 years of taking care of the twins had taught me one thing. My dad's sorry lasted about as long as his sobriety, which was usually measured in hours, not days. I ignored the text and headed to the motel. I needed to figure out my next move. The emergency housing options Patricia gave me all had waiting lists. The job placement programs required an address. It was like being stuck in quicksand. Every attempt to get out just pulled me deeper. After 3 days at the motel, my money ran out. I had two choices: sleep on the streets or go home. I chose the latter, figuring I could at least grab more of my stuff and maybe find somewhere else to crash. I timed my arrival for when I knew my dad would be at work. Only my mom was home, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. She barely looked up when I walked in. "Your father's very upset," she said, like I'd forgotten to take out the trash instead of defending myself from a beating. I ignored her and went upstairs to pack more clothes. I was shoving shirts into my backpack when I heard the front door slam. My stomach dropped. Dad was home early. His footsteps on the stairs were slow, deliberate. When he appeared in my doorway, I braced myself for another explosion. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. "We both made mistakes. Let's start fresh." I stared at him, waiting for the other shoe to drop. He continued, "The twins are gone for now. That's probably for the best until we sort things out. But you're my daughter. This is your home." His tone was reasonable, almost gentle. For a second, just a second, I felt that familiar hope rise up. Maybe this time he really meant it. "I talked to Uncle George," he continued. "He said you can work at his garage part-time. Good money. You can save up, maybe take some classes at the community college." Uncle George was my dad's older brother. I'd always liked him, though we weren't close. The offer sounded legitimate. "What about the police report?" I asked. Dad waved his hand dismissively. "I told them it was a misunderstanding. Heat of the moment. They understand. Happens in families all the time." I was skeptical about how easily he'd managed to downplay what happened. The hospital had documented my injuries, and there were reports about the hockey stick incident. But my dad had always been good at talking his way out of trouble. Charming teachers, neighbors, even police officers when needed. It's why no one ever believed me when I tried to hint at what was happening. I agreed to stay, not because I trusted him, but because I needed time to figure out my next move. That night, he ordered pizza and acted like nothing had happened. Mom followed his lead, relieved that the tension had broken. The next day, I started at Uncle George's garage. It wasn't bad work, mostly answering phones and handling paperwork. Uncle George was fair, if a bit gruff. He didn't mention anything about what had happened, which was fine by me. For about 2 weeks, things were almost normal. Dad stayed relatively sober. He'd have a few beers, but nothing that sent him into a rage. He even took me out to dinner one night, just the two of us, and talked about how proud he was that I was getting my act together. I visited the twins twice during this time. The Hendersons were amazing with them. Ella was coming out of her shell, chattering about her new school. Elliot showed me a drawing he'd made where he wasn't hiding in a corner. Progress. Then one evening, I came home from work to find my dad sitting with Aunt Deborah, his younger sister. They both looked up when I walked in, conversation stopping abruptly. "There she is," Dad said, his smile not reaching his eyes, "the one I was telling you about." Aunt Deborah gave me a strange look, part pity, part suspicion. "How are you feeling, sweetie? Your dad says you've been having some episodes." I froze. "Episodes?" Dad jumped in. "I was just explaining to Deb about your outbursts, the hallucinations, how you attacked me for no reason." My blood ran cold. I opened my mouth to protest, but Aunt Deborah was already nodding sympathetically. "It's nothing to be ashamed of," she said. "Mental illness runs in families. Your grandmother had similar issues." I looked at my dad, Dad, who gave me a warning glance. The message was clear. Contradict me, and things will get worse. After Aunt Deborah left, Dad dropped the act. You think you can turn people against me? I've known these people my whole life. Who do you think they'll believe? Me or some unstable teenager? I realized then what he was doing. He was isolating me, making sure no one would believe me if I tried to speak out again. And it was working. The next day at the garage, Uncle George was different, distant, watching me carefully. Dad had gotten to him too. Your dad says you're on medication now, he said during lunch break. That's good. Important to take care of yourself. I wasn't on any medication. Dad was building a narrative that I was unstable, possibly dangerous. I tried to explain, but Uncle George just nodded in that patronizing way adults do when they think you're not in your right mind. That weekend, I had a job interview at a cafe across town. It was nothing special, just serving coffee, but it would give me income separate from Uncle George's garage, income my dad couldn't control. I never made it to the interview. My bus pass mysteriously disappeared from my wallet. When I tried to call for an Uber, my phone was dead, even though I'd charged it overnight. Dad offered to drive me, then remembered he had to help a friend move. When I finally got to the cafe 2 hours late, the manager told me they'd already hired someone else. As I turned to leave, I saw him, my dad, sitting in the corner with a coffee, watching me. He'd made sure I failed. That night, I overheard him on the phone with someone from the twins case. He was putting on his concerned father voice, talking about how worried he was about my mental state, how I'd been making up stories. I just want what's best for all my children, he said, sounding so sincere it made me sick. I'm working on myself too, attending AA meetings, anger management classes. He wasn't doing any of those things. He was building a case, making himself look like the recovering father while painting me as the unstable one. The next week, things got worse. I came home to find my room ransacked, clothes torn, books ripped apart. My laptop screen was shattered. Dad was sitting in the living room, calmly watching TV. Someone broke in while we were out, he said without looking at me. Weird that they only targeted your room, huh? I knew he'd done it. He knew I knew. But what could I do? Call the police? They already thought I was making things up thanks to him. Mom just shook her head when she saw the damage. Maybe if you kept your room cleaner, this wouldn't have happened, she muttered. I was trapped. Every time I tried to build any independence, Dad sabotaged it. He called in sick for me at the garage without my knowledge. He told neighbors I was having episodes, so they'd report back if they saw me leaving the house. One day, I came home to find him going through my phone. He'd guessed my password. Just checking to make sure you're not doing anything dangerous, he said casually. Parental responsibility. He'd deleted all my contacts except for his and Mom's. All my photos of the twins were gone, my text history wiped clean. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the beating hadn't been as bad as I remembered. Maybe I had attacked him first with a hockey stick. The gaslighting was working. The only thing keeping me sane was my visits with the twins, but even those became complicated. Dad insisted on driving me there, waiting outside, timing how long I stayed. The Hendersons noticed, asked questions I was afraid to answer honestly. During one visit, Mrs. Henderson pulled me aside. Is everything okay at home? She asked quietly. I wanted to tell her everything, but Dad was right outside. What if he heard? What if he took it out on the twins somehow? Everything's fine, I lied, just adjusting. One night, I woke up to find Dad standing in my doorway, just watching me sleep. When I sat up, startled, he didn't move. You know, he said softly, I could make things so much worse for you. Remember that. I barely slept after that. I started pushing my dresser in front of my door at night. The breaking point came when I discovered Dad had been impersonating me online. He'd created fake social media accounts in my name, posting bizarre rants and concerning messages. He was building a digital trail of my supposed instability. I confronted him, which was a mistake. He didn't even deny it. Who would believe you? He laughed. Look at your history. You're clearly disturbed. That night, I made a decision. I had to get out, but I needed evidence first. I needed proof that I wasn't crazy, that he was the monster, not me. I borrowed money from the garage's petty cash. I planned to pay it back and bought a small camera. I hid it in my room, angled to capture the door. If he came in again at night, I'd have proof. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then on the 4th night, the camera caught him. Not only did he come into my room, but he planted things. Pills I'd never seen before, hidden under my mattress. A knife taken from the kitchen, slipped into my desk drawer. He was setting me up. For what? I wasn't sure, but it couldn't be good. The next day, I pretended everything was normal. I went to work, came home, ate dinner with my parents. Dad was in an unusually good mood, which always made me nervous. After dinner, he announced he'd invited some family over for the weekend. Time to clear the air, he said. Get everyone on the same page about our situation. Our situation. Like we were in this together. Like he wasn't systematically destroying my life. That night, I checked the camera again. This time, I caught him on my laptop, which he'd fixed after it was vandalized. He was typing emails from my account to my social worker, canceling upcoming visits with the twins, claiming I was too busy with my new boyfriend to see them. I felt sick. He was trying to sever my last connection to the twins without me checking on them, who would make sure they were okay. I copied the video files to a USB drive and hid it in my sock. The next day at work, I used Uncle George's computer to email the files to myself at a new email address Dad didn't know about. Uncle George caught me. What are you doing? He asked, suspicious. I panicked and closed the browser, just checking my email. He didn't believe me. I could tell. Later, I overheard him on the phone with my dad. She was acting weird on the computer. Yeah, I'll keep an eye on her. When I got home, Dad was waiting. Computer privileges revoked, he said, holding up my laptop. George told me what you were doing. Checking my email? I asked, trying to sound innocent. Don't play dumb. You were sending those lies again, weren't you? Trying to turn people against me? He threw my laptop against the wall. It shattered completely this time. Family's coming tomorrow, he reminded me. You'd better be on your best behavior. No crazy talk. I nodded, already planning my next move. I had the USB drive. I had evidence. I just needed someone to show it to. Someone who might believe me. That night, I called Aunt Lillian, my mom's sister. We weren't close, but she'd always been kind to me. More importantly, she lived 3 hours away and had minimal contact with my dad. Can I come visit? I asked when she answered, just for a day or two? She sounded surprised, but agreed. I told her I'd take the bus the next morning. I packed a small bag and hid it under my bed. The plan was to slip out early before anyone woke up. I'd show Aunt Lillian the videos, explain everything. Maybe she'd help me figure out what to do next. But as usual, Dad was one step ahead. When my alarm went off at 5 a.m., I found him sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee. Going somewhere? He asked, nodding at my jacket. Just for a walk. I lied. Couldn't sleep. He smiled that cold smile. Funny, because I got a call from Lillian last night. Apparently you're planning a visit? My heart sank. Of course he'd checked my phone. I told her you've been having these episodes of paranoia, he continued, making up stories. She agreed it's best if you stay home where we can keep an eye on you. I felt the walls closing in. Dad stood up, blocking my path to the door. Family will be here in a few hours, he said. Why don't you go back to bed? You look tired. I retreated to my room, mind racing. The family gathering wasn't about clearing the air, it was an intervention. For me, Dad had convinced everyone I was unstable, dangerous even. They were coming to help him deal with me. I was out of options, or so I thought. As I sat on my bed, staring at the wall, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Mrs. Henderson. Are you okay? The twins are worried. I hadn't canceled my visit with the twins scheduled for that afternoon. Dad had sent those emails, but the Hendersons must have realized something was wrong. I texted back quickly. Not okay. Need help. Dad watching everything. The response came immediately. We're coming to get you. Be ready at 2. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. But how would I get past Dad? The family would be arriving soon, and he'd be watching me like a hawk. I needed a distraction, something big enough to occupy everyone while I slipped away. The answer came in the form of Uncle Jeffrey, who arrived early. Uncle Jeffrey was my dad's youngest brother, and they had a volatile relationship at best. All it took was one carefully placed comment about Dad's drinking, and they were at each other's throats. As they argued in the living room, voices rising, I slipped out the back door. Mrs. Henderson was waiting down the block in her minivan, engine running. I jumped in, clutching my bag with a USB drive. Thank you, I gasped, fighting back tears. The twins knew something was wrong, she said, pulling away from the curb. They said you'd never miss a visit unless something bad happened. We drove straight to her house where the twins were waiting with Mr. Henderson. Ella threw herself into my arms, while Elliot hovered nervously nearby. Are you okay? Ella whispered. Did he hurt you again? I hugged her tight. I'm okay now. Mr. Henderson, who turned out to be a retired police officer, watched the videos from my USB drive with a grim expression. This is serious, he said. Psychological abuse, gaslighting, possible false imprisonment. He made some calls to former colleagues. Within hours, I had a temporary restraining order against my dad. The Hendersons insisted I stay with them, just until we figure things out, Mrs. Henderson said. The twins would love having you here. That night, my phone exploded with texts and calls from family members. Dad had told them I'd run away during my episode. Some were concerned, others angry. I turned off my phone. Mr. Henderson helped me document everything. The manipulation, the isolation, the threats. We compiled a timeline of events, backed up by the video evidence. Your father's been playing a long game, he said, but so can we. The next day, we met with Patricia, my social worker. She was horrified by what had happened, but not entirely surprised. Your father called me multiple times, trying to paint you as unstable, she admitted. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. With Patricia's help, we arranged for me to formally join the twins' case. Even though I was an adult, I qualified for certain support services as their sibling and former caregiver. Dad didn't go down without a fight. He showed up at the Hendersons' house demanding to see me. When they refused, he threatened to call the police and report me kidnapped. Go ahead, Mr. Henderson told him calmly. I've already filed a report with my former precinct. They're expecting your call. Dad backed down, but the war wasn't over. He started spreading rumors in the neighborhood. He told my former school counselor I was having a breakdown. He even contacted the garage where I worked, telling Uncle George I'd stolen money, which wasn't entirely untrue, but I'd planned to return it. But this time, I wasn't alone. The Hendersons stood by me. Patricia advocated for me. And most importantly, I had evidence. One by one, family members began to see through Dad's lies. Aunt Deborah was the first to come around after seeing the videos. Then Uncle George, who admitted Dad had been feeding him stories about me for weeks. Mom was the hardest. She'd spent so many years enabling Dad that she couldn't face the truth. When I finally got her alone and showed her the evidence, she broke down. I didn't know what to do, she sobbed. I was scared too. I understood, even if I couldn't fully forgive her yet. Fear was a powerful motivator. It had kept me silent for years too. 3 weeks after I escaped, I received news that changed everything. The twins' case had been reviewed, and the court had decided they should remain with the Hendersons long term. More surprisingly, the Hendersons had asked to include me in their family care plan. We want you to be part of their lives, Mrs. Henderson explained, and part of ours, if you want. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a real family, one built on support and kindness rather than fear and control. Dad made one last desperate attempt to regain control. He showed up at the Hendersons during dinner, hammered and belligerent. He demanded to see his children, claimed we were all conspiring against him. Mr. Henderson Henderson calmly recorded the entire incident while Mrs. Henderson called the police. When they arrived, Dad tried to charm them like he always did. But this time, his act didn't work. "We have quite a file on you, sir," one officer said. "I suggest you leave before we add to it." Dad looked at me through the window, his eyes filled with a hatred I'd never seen before. In that moment, I realized he'd never loved any of us. Not me, not the twins, not even Mom. We were just things he wanted to control. As they escorted him to his car, I felt something unexpected: pity. He was a small, broken man who would always be alone. The next day, I visited the twins' school to meet their teachers. As I watched them play with their new friends, laughing and carefree, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. They were going to be okay. We all were. I watched Dad being escorted to his car, feeling this weird mix of relief and dread. Like, I knew this wasn't over. Guys like my dad don't just give up when they lose control. They double down. Sure enough, the next morning, Mr. Henderson found all 4 tires on his car slashed. No proof it was my dad, of course. He was too smart for that, but we all knew. "Don't worry about it," Mr. Henderson told me when he saw my face. "Got a buddy at the tire shop who'll give me a deal." I offered to help pay with my garage money, but he wouldn't hear of it. The Hendersons were like that. Genuinely kind in a way that still felt weird to me, like I was waiting for the catch. 2 days later, I was helping Ella with her homework when Patricia called. Dad had filed a formal complaint against the Hendersons, claiming they were alienating his children and interfering with his parental rights. "It's just noise," Patricia assured me. "With his record and your evidence, no judge is going to take him seriously." But that didn't stop the mandatory investigation. Some guy named Campbell from Family Services came to inspect the Henderson house, interview the twins, and basically make everyone super uncomfortable for an afternoon. The twins handled it like champs, though. Elliot showed Campbell his room, proudly pointing out that he had a real bed all to myself. Ella talked about her new school and how Mrs. Henderson always packed her favorite snacks. Little things that broke my heart because they shouldn't have been special. Campbell seemed decent enough. He took lots of notes and asked me some questions about my allegations against my father. I just handed him the USB drive. "Watch it yourself," I told him. "Then tell me if you think I'm making this up." The look on his face when he returned the drive the next day told me everything. "We'll be dismissing your father's complaint," he said quietly. I thought that would be the end of it. Stupid me. Dad switched tactics. If he couldn't get to us through official channels, he'd try unofficial ones. He started showing up at the twins' school, claiming he was there for parent-teacher conferences. Thankfully, the Hendersons had already warned the administration, and they called the police each time. Then he tried contacting my new boss at the coffee shop where I'd finally gotten a job, told her I had serious mental health issues and couldn't be trusted around customers. My boss, Gloria, just laughed in his face. "That guy who was just in here, your dad?" she asked when I came in for my shift. Total creep vibes. "Told me some crazy story about you being dangerous or something." My stomach dropped. "What did you tell him?" "Told him to get out before I called the cops," she shrugged. "I don't hire dangerous people, and you're about as threatening as a sleepy kitten." I could have hugged her. Actually, I think I did. The real turning point came about a month after I moved in with the Hendersons. I was checking my email at the public library, still didn't have my own computer, when I saw a message from Uncle George. "Need to talk. Important. Meet at the garage Saturday?" I showed it to Mr. Henderson, who insisted on coming with me. "Just in case," he said. Uncle George looked terrible when we arrived, tired and guilty. He waved Mr. Henderson away. "Just need 5 minutes with my niece." Mr. Henderson looked at me. I nodded. "I'll be fine. He's okay." As soon as we were alone, Uncle George pulled out his phone. "Your dad doesn't know I have this," he said, pressing play on a video. It was my dad, hammered off his butt, ranting to Uncle George in what looked like our old basement. "She thinks she's so smart with her videos," he slurred. "I'll show her videos. I'll show everyone what a liar she is." Then he admitted to everything: the gaslighting, the setup, how he'd planned to have me committed for my own good, so he could get the twins back and access their support payments. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked when it ended. Uncle George wouldn't meet my eyes. "Your dad's been my brother my whole life. I always looked up to him, even when I knew he was wrong. But this," he shook his head, "this isn't right. What he did to you kids isn't right. He sent me the video before I left. Do what you need to do with it," he said. "I won't stop you." With Uncle George's video added to my evidence, Patricia suggested we file for a permanent restraining order. "Not just for you," she explained, "for the twins too." The hearing was set for the following month. In the meantime, life settled into something almost normal. I worked mornings at the coffee shop, took online classes in the afternoons, and helped with the twins in the evenings. The Hendersons treated me like family, not a burden. Mrs. Henderson even helped me apply for community college. "Just for when you're ready," she said. No pressure. The twins were thriving. Elliot had joined a soccer team and actually made friends for the first time in his life. Ella discovered she loved art and covered the Hendersons' fridge with colorful drawings, none of which featured scary monsters or sad faces like her old pictures. I visited them at school sometimes during my lunch break. Their teachers always commented on how much progress they were making. "Whatever you're doing at home, keep it up," Elliot's teacher told me, assuming I was their older sister who'd always taken care of them, which I guess was true enough. One afternoon, I ran into my mom at the grocery store. Total accident. I was buying coffee for the house, and there she was in the cereal aisle, looking thin and tired. She saw me before I could escape. "How are they?" she asked quietly. "Good," I said stiffly. "Really good." She nodded, eyes filling with tears. "I filed for divorce," she whispered. "He doesn't know yet." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to hug her. Another part wanted to scream at her for not doing this years ago, when it might have saved us all a lot of pain. "I'm staying with my sister," she continued. She's been helping me see things clearly. Aunt Lillian, the one I'd tried to escape to. At least someone in my family had stepped up. Would it be possible to see them sometime? Mom asked hesitantly. I didn't make any promises, just told her I'd talk to Patricia about it. The twins deserved to have a relationship with their mom if she was finally getting her act together, but I wasn't going to be the one to make that call alone. The day of the restraining order hearing arrived faster than I expected. I wore the nicest clothes I had, which wasn't saying much. Mrs. Henderson had offered to buy me something new, but it felt wrong to take more from them than I already had. Dad showed up with a lawyer, looking sober and respectable in a button-down shirt I'd never seen before. He smiled at me like we were just having a minor disagreement. I kept my eyes on Patricia instead. The judge was a no-nonsense woman named Judge Parker, who clearly had zero patience for family drama. She reviewed our evidence, including Uncle George's video, with a completely neutral expression. Dad's lawyer tried to argue that I was manipulating the situation, that I'd always been troubled, and was now turning the twins against their father. The usual garbage. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. No dramatic speeches, just facts. My father hurt us, I said, physically and mentally. The twins are safe now. They're happy. I just want them to stay that way. Judge Parker asked a few questions about the videos, about the twins' current situation. Then she turned to my dad. Sir, do you have anything to add in your defense? Dad put on his best concerned father face. Your Honor, I've made mistakes. I admit that. I've struggled with alcohol, but I love my children. I'm their father. I deserve a chance to make things right. Judge Parker looked at him for a long moment. Mr. Miller, I've reviewed the evidence thoroughly. What I see is not a father who made mistakes. I see a pattern of calculated abuse and manipulation. She granted the permanent restraining order on the spot. Dad couldn't come within 500 feet of me or the twins. No contact whatsoever. Dad's face when the ruling came down, I'll never forget it. That mask of respectability just cracked wide open. For a second, I saw the real him glaring at me with pure hatred. Then his lawyer grabbed his arm and whispered something, and the mask slipped back on. This isn't over, he muttered as they walked past us in the hallway. But it was. That was the last time I saw my dad in person. We heard things, of course. Mom told us he lost his job after showing up hammered too many times. Then he lost the house. Last I heard, he was crashing with some drinking buddy in a different state. Mom kept her word about the divorce. She also started therapy, which was honestly shocking. In our family, therapy was for crazy people, not something normal folks did, but she stuck with it. After 3 months of supervised visits with the twins, Patricia agreed Mom could see them on her own sometimes. She never asked to take them back, though. I think she knew they were better off with the Hendersons. I wasn't ready to be a mother, she told me during one of our awkward coffee meetups. I'm still not, but I'm trying to be better. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was something. The twins adjusted to seeing Mom every couple of weeks. They were cautious at first, especially Elliot, but kids are resilient. They didn't forget what happened, but they made room for this new version of their mom who actually paid attention to them. As for me, I started community college that fall. Just 2 classes to begin with, English and psychology. Turns out I'm not bad at school when I'm not also raising 2 kids and dodging an abusive father. The Hendersons insisted I stay with them. You're family now, Mrs. Henderson said when I brought up moving out. Besides, the twins would be heartbroken. So I stayed. I got promoted at the coffee shop to shift supervisor. I made actual friends for the first time in my life. Normal stuff that shouldn't feel like miracles but did. 1 year after everything went down, the Hendersons made it official. They adopted the twins. The ceremony at the courthouse was small. Just us, Patricia, Mom, and a few close friends. Ella wore a dress with unicorns on it. Elliot couldn't stop fidgeting with his clip-on tie. When the judge asked if anyone wanted to say anything, Elliot raised his hand. Does this mean we get to stay forever? He asked. Yes, buddy, Mr. Henderson told him. Forever. Ella looked at me anxiously. You too, right? You're staying too? I knelt down to her level. I'm not going anywhere, I promised. And I meant it. That night, we had a celebration dinner at the Hendersons' house. My house too, I guess. Mom came, bringing a cake she'd baked herself. It was lopsided and the frosting was a mess, but it was the first thing she'd ever made for the twins, so it was perfect. After everyone left and the twins were in bed, I sat on the porch swing with Mrs. Henderson. We didn't talk much, just watched the stars come out. You know, she said finally, when we first became foster parents, we thought we'd be helping children. We never expected one of them would be helping us just as much. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just leaned my head on her shoulder. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't bracing for the next crisis. I was just, they're safe, home. The twins still have nightmares sometimes. So do I. We probably always will. But now when they wake up scared, there's always someone there to tell them everything's okay. And when I wake up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, I can walk down the hall and peek into their rooms, see them sleeping peacefully, and know that I did that. I got them out. I broke the cycle. That's enough for me.